Hello everyone and welcome to chapter 11 DML data manipulation language and TCL transaction control language. This chapter is divided into 4 lessons: DML insert statement, DML update statement, DML delete statement, and in the last lesson TCL transaction control language. In the first lesson we are going to learn DML insert statement. In Oracle SQL, commands are divided into 4 main categories. The first category, which is DML or data manipulation language. In data manipulation language, there are 5 commands. The select statement, that is used to retrieve data from tables, and the data manipulation commands. Insert, used to add rows to a table. Update, to modify existing rows in a table. Delete, to remove existing rows from a table. Merge command, which will be discussed later, used to insert, update, or delete table data in one command. The second category, which is transaction control language, commit, rollback, and save point. These commands will be discussed in this chapter. The third category is DDL or data definition language. It's used to create database objects like create table, create index, create sequence, procedures, and so on. Alter is used to modify database objects. Drop, to drop database object. Truncate, to remove data from tables. Comment, to add a comment to a table or to add a comment to a column. Rename, to rename a database object, like renaming, for example, table, renaming column, or renaming constraint. The fourth category is data control language or TCL. There are 2 main commands in this category: grant and revoke. Grant is used to give permissions to a database user. Revoke, to remove permissions from a database user. In this chapter, we are focusing on data manipulation language and transaction control language. Other categories will be discussed in later chapters. DML insert statement or data manipulation language insert statement is used to add or insert a new row or a new record to an existing table. So here, for example, we have a table, departments table. It contains a list of departments and we want to add a new department. For example, department ID is 300, department name is supply chain, manager ID null, and the location ID is 1800. So in this case, the DML insert statement can be used to add this record to an existing table. The syntax of writing a DML statement is very easy. You can just type insert into the table name. Optionally, you can specify the column list in the table, values, and provide the value list. Let's have a look at example 1, how to add a record to a departments table. Insert into departments. This is the structure of the departments table. The departments table contains 4 columns: department ID, department name, manager ID, and location ID. You can specify the column list when you adding a new record to the table. For example, here, insert into departments, brackets, department ID, department name, manager ID, location ID, values 300, supply chain null, and 1800. If you are adding string, you have to enclose the string with single quotation mark. If also you adding a date, you have to enclose it with single quotation mark. For numbers, you don't have to specify a quotation mark. So here the 300 value will be used for the column department ID. For the department name, it is supply chain. The null value for the manager, and 1800 for the location ID. So here we add a record, department ID 300, department name supply chain, manager ID is null, and location ID 1800. In the second example here, insert into departments location ID department name, department ID. Values 1800, supply chain 300. So 1800 will be inserted to the location ID. For the department name, supply chain. For the department ID, 300. In order. Location ID, the first value. The second column, department name, supply chain. The third column, department ID, 300. What about the manager ID? Because the table contains 4 columns. The manager ID here will be null. You can also insert a statement without specifying a column list, as in this example. Insert into departments values 300, supply chain, null, and 1800. In this case, you have to provide a value for all columns. In case you have 4 columns, you have to provide here 4 values. In this example, example 2, because we list only 3 columns, we can specify only 3 values. But here, if you don't specify the column names in the insert statement, you have to provide a value for each column. So 300 will go to the first column, which is the department ID. Supply chain go to the second column, which is department name. Null goes to the third column, which is the manager ID. 1800 goes to the fourth column, which is location ID. Just keep in mind these 2 notes. Enclose character and date values with a single quotation mark. If you don't use the column list, as in the third example, the values must be listed according to the default order of the column in the table, and a value must be provided for each column. As we said, you have to provide a value for each column, and the values will be used in order. Let's have a look at this example, example 4. Insert into departments values 300, supply chain 1800. Here we didn't provide a list of columns, so in this case you have to provide a value for each column. How many columns we have? We have 4 columns. How many values we provide? We provide only 3 values, so Oracle will return an error, not enough values. So he is expecting 4 values and you provide only 3 values, so Oracle returns in this case an error. In the 5th example here, we can use functions during the insert into departments values 300. So 300 will be used for the department ID. Upper supply chain, so he will convert the supply chain string and insert it as a department name. Null value for the manager ID, 1800 for the location ID. So the record will be inserted to the departments table, 300 supply chain capital, and null value for the manager ID, and 1800 for the location ID. In the last example here, copying rows from another table. Let's assume that we have 2 tables. Department underscore all contains only 2 columns, and departments table contains 4 columns. I want to copy all department IDs and department names from departments table to the department underscore all table. So we can do insert into dept underscore all. In this case, we use a select statement. We don't provide values. Values is used to insert only 1 record at a time to the table. But here, instead of values, we're specifying a subquery or a select statement. So Oracle here will run the select statement, select department ID, department name from departments where location ID equal 1400, and the records returned from this select statement will be inserted into dept underscore all, regardless how many records returned by the select statement. So this is how to copy rows from table to another table using insert select. So in this lesson, we learned how to write DML insert statement to add a new record or a new row to an existing table. I hope this video was informative for you, and thank you for watching.